Would you eat poison if you knew it was in your food? I don't think so. Yet each of us eats toxic food each day without even knowing it. But there is a solution. Imagine if you could figure out what foods are good for you and what foods are not in the comfort of your own home. Very simple, no fancy equipment needed, just you and your body. Well, now you can using energy kinesiology. It's amazing. It's easy and it's a game changer because you're eating food that is harming you and you don't know it, or even if you do know it, it's going to cause you a lot of health challenges, even chronic illness. So it's important to figure that out. Welcome to the Health Builders community, where you will find lots of natural ways of sorting out common health problems. And much of it is free. So what's the deal with food? This part of the series is about foods that harm and foods that heal. And yes, there are foods that harm you and there are foods that will heal you. And we each need to know what they are for us. And here's the fascinating thing. Individually, they are unique to us. That's where it becomes challenging, because we're all so uniquely different that what works for you may not, and probably won't, work for me. So let's look at the big picture. Foods that harm and foods that heal. The healing foods in creation are plant-based foods. Those are the ones that give your body the greatest opportunity to heal itself. Plant-based foods include vegetables, fruits, cereals, pulses, nuts, seeds, and dried fruits as well, of course. Those are the plant-based foods, and those will be more inclined to heal your body. They provide more healing power than other foods. That's the way God created it. That doesn't mean that other foods don't have their place, as you'll see shortly, but the ones that have the most healing power are the plant-based foods, which we don't all eat a lot of. Your body was designed to eat natural foods that come out of the garden or come out of the ground. That's the way God made it. That's what allows your digestive system to work best. It was designed to utilize these types of foods. These types of foods are where you need to look if you want the best healing results. Basically, we're looking at vegetables and fruits. Those are the main ones. Let's look now at organic versus non-organic. Do you know what the difference is? It's very, very significant, because food today in general is toxic, and you need to find foods that are least toxic. Now, when it comes to healing, there are a few key things that you need to understand, and these are the things that are going to help you heal your body. Toxins, rubbish, stuff that's in your body that shouldn't be there has to be got out. So there are two massive things we need to do to activate healing. We need to reduce inflammation and we need to get the toxins out. Let me say that again. We need to reduce inflammation and we need to get the toxins out. And you can do these two simultaneously. They are two powerful keys to getting well. So how do we do this? You need to look for foods that don't add toxicity to your body. If you're eating a food and you're reacting to it and you don't know, then it's adding toxicity to your body, as we'll shortly see. Let me explain exactly how this works. But before I do, I need to address the question of how are you going to know what's the right food and what's not the right food? Which foods are toxic for you and which ones are not? Especially since we're all uniquely different. Well, there is a way of doing this, and it's called energy kinesiology. It's absolutely fascinating. Your body already knows what's good for you and what's not good for you. It just doesn't have any way of telling you. Until now, that is. Because with energy kinesiology, using a very simple test, which I will show you and teach you, you can do this in seconds. And the good news is that this information is free. There is a link in the description of this video that will take you to a free course on how to do this. You can figure it out before you even eat the food, whether it's good or whether it's not. Isn't that amazing? And as I've said, there is a link in the description below this video where you can see how it all works, and it's free. But before you go there, let's understand a few more important things. Everybody can learn energy kinesiology because basically every single person on the planet is wired to use it. It's by divine design. It's been there all along. The reason people don't use it is because they don't know it's there. But once you see it and you use it, it'll blow you away. It's amazing. Anyway, I'll talk more about this as we go along. So back to food and the story with organic food. Organic food is food that is grown in land that has not been sprayed with chemicals and fertilizers and pesticides. And it's grown in a cycle or a rotation that gives the food every chance of being nutritionally balanced. So there's a lot going on here. If you can get it, and you need to try and get organic food, it can be a game changer, especially if you're sick. You'll understand why shortly. So organic food is better. In fact, organic is best. This doesn't mean it doesn't have any chemicals in it, because stuff is falling out of the sky all the time. They're spraying the clouds with chemicals, apparently to control the weather. I mean, the world is toxic, but organic food is a whole lot better than food that's grown commercially. Let me explain why. Now, my background is agriculture. I have a Bachelor of Agriculture degree, science degree that is, which I got back in the 70s. I specialized at that time in crop production. So I know a little bit about this, and to be quite honest with you, things have only got a lot worse since the 70s, because basically farmers have been trapped into using more and more chemicals to maintain their yields. So what's going on here? We're basically saying that if you grow the same crop in the same field year after year, you're going to mine the minerals in the land. They're going to disappear. There's only a limited amount of minerals in any field, and basically when they're gone, they're gone. Let me give you an example. The farmer up behind us where we live has been growing barley in the same field for 20 years, or more actually. No change. So inevitably that field has become deficient in minerals. So the crops don't do as well. So they add more fertilizers, and they add more chemicals, and they add more minerals, and they add more sprays because the crops are sick. So now you have a crop that is nutritionally deficient because the minerals aren't in the soil anyway, and toxic because of all the sprays that are put on it. That's commercial farming. That's the way most food is produced these days. Apply that to your food if you're growing carrots, for example. They will be grown in land that may well be deficient because it's been mined of minerals over many years by other crops. And so the carrots will be deficient. Go back to the organic principle. In organic farming, you have to use a rotation. You cannot grow the same crop in the same field year after year because it will die. It just won't work. So here's how it would work in a classic organic situation. You could have a field of grass. It might have been in grass for 6 or 7 years, grazed by cattle. You plough that field and you grow a crop of wheat. But the next year you might grow a crop of sugar beet, and the following year you might grow a crop of oats or barley, and the following year you might grow potatoes. And along the way you will have put some farmyard manure back into the soil, and you will be recycling the nutrients in the land. And then after 4 years you'll put it back into grass with lots of clover. Clover fixes its own nitrogen, so you don't need fertilizers, and the land will regenerate and recycle the minerals. Food grown in this type of land basically has the nutrients in it because the nutrients are in the soil. Makes sense, doesn't it? If they're not in the soil, they're not going to be in the food. Pretty logical, right? But when you're buying commercially produced food, most of the time you're looking at food that is nutritionally deficient, and you don't know it. Now remember, your body uses loads and loads of different nutrients in order to make the enzymes and the proteins and the things it needs to digest your food. So if it doesn't have these minerals and trace elements, it can't make the proteins. And just so you know, 70% of your immune system lives in your digestive system, so it's a big deal. Zinc, which is one of the critical minerals, is very important for your immune system and for making enzymes for digesting your food. So if you're eating food that's very processed, you're depleting your body of minerals as you're not replacing the minerals that you're using. This is true for a wide range of minerals and even vitamins, trace elements as well. That's why organic is better than non-organic. But there's another reason, and the reason is the toxicity. The sprays and the chemicals that are put on the food, on the plants as they grow in commercial farming, get into the food, and then they get into the food chain, and then they get into you, and then they get into your gut, and they disrupt the biome, this amazing, sensitive and complex ecosystem that lives in your digestive system. You have billions, actually, you have trillions of bacteria in your gut, and they have a very important function in keeping you healthy, because that is their job. I would say if you had a magic wand and you could fix your gut, 70% of all the issues would disappear in your health. The gut is a critical component of your health. That's why the food you eat is a critical component in your health. Now, what I'm talking about here is not making major radical changes. What I'm saying is that you have to identify the foods that are harming you and stop using them. And you have to use more of the foods that are healing you and keep using them. That's all I'm saying. And in order to do that, to be able to identify them instantly on the shelf, in the shop, or at home, you need a system, and energy kinesiology is the answer. Simply click the link for the free training in the description of this video and get started. Remember, without some way of knowing what food is good for you and which isn't, you're stuck. Well, you are stuck. But once you find this information out, it's a game changer. But let's continue. Now, food isn't the only part of this equation. There's a lot more, but food is really important and it's a good place to start. So vegetables and plant-based foods are the very important foods you need for healing. You need to make sure you get enough plant-based foods in your diet. That brings us onto the question of vegan or vegetarian or omnivore. Omnivores are people who can eat anything or eat everything. Is there a better way? Is one better than the other? Well, in truth, there isn't necessarily a better way. For me, I personally enjoy being a vegan or eating vegan food. I'm not a strict vegan. I eat meat, I eat fish, but I find my body does well on vegan. And the reason for that is kind of interesting. Back in the 90s, a medical doctor called Dr. Dadamo actually wrote a book called Eat Right for Your Type. He discovered that the 4 different blood types, that's the A, the O, the B, and the AB, each have a tendency towards certain food sensitivities. If you're an A, like I am, you will do very well on vegetables and a vegan type eating program. If you're an O, which is the commonest one, you'll do well on meat, but not so well on dairy. If you're a B, you can probably handle dairy, and so on and so forth. And there's a link, but it's not a fixed link. It's a tenuous type of idea, but it gives you an indication of where you might stand. You have a certain propensity, a certain possibility, that, shall I say, a genetic tendency towards being able to eat certain foods without problems compared to other foods, depending on your blood type. It's a broad brush. I wouldn't be getting into it too much, but it's interesting that a medical person discovered it. Of course, very few medical practitioners today have bought into it or even know about it. But the book is interesting and it's well worth reading if you're interested in that stuff. But you don't need all that information if you have energy kinesiology, because you can just ask the body straight and the body will tell you instantly, is this good for me? Is it not? Yes, no. Nothing to do with your blood type, it's just to do with the food. is this food good for me or is it not? Now, here's the other interesting thing. Just because a food is organic, it doesn't mean it's going to be good for you automatically, because you may have a sensitivity to, say, potatoes. Whether they're organic or not isn't going to make any difference. You might be more sensitive to the non-organic ones, but you still may well have a sensitivity to the organic ones. So without a means of testing, you're really stymied. You don't have any way of knowing. You can only guess, and guessing isn't going to get the job done. If you have a chronic health challenge, we need to get the inflammation down, and we need to get the toxins out. And this is how you do it. You get yourself into a positive state where you're eating foods that are good for you, and you're not eating foods that are harming you. That's a key. As I've said, you can get a link to the course in the description of this video. This is not complicated at all, and it will be an absolute game changer as you go along and use it. So we've talked about plant-based foods. So what about meat? How about beef? Well, generally speaking, beef is a good food. It depends where you get it. Irish beef is pretty clean, pretty good, because Irish cattle are grazed on the land with very few additives. Other beef, however, can often have other issues. It can be injected with things like hormones and other things that are not so good. Also, most beef cattle are being fed in feedlots, whereas in Ireland the beef is grass-fed. And it makes a big difference, and it's worth checking it out. The more natural and the more wholesome and the more back to earth the stuff is, the healthier it will be. What about lamb? Well, lambs live quite a short time. They don't have much time to absorb toxins in the environment, so lamb is generally pretty good. Pig meats are not so great though, however. If you watch pigs, they're produced in very unpleasant conditions. They're fed food that isn't all that wonderful. They don't get out into the sunlight or anything like that. So pig meats tend to be a little more toxic, but test them with the energy kinesiology and see. Pigs, by their nature, are scavengers. For some people, pig meat is fine. For some people, it isn't. Some people can eat pork. Some people can't. Some people can manage bacon and still can't manage pork. It's that individual. You just simply have to test the food using energy kinesiology for you, and then you'll know. It takes literally 1 second and it's done. So once you know how to do it, and it's very easy to learn, it takes all the guessing away. So pig meats are probably more likely to be causing problems, particularly ham. You know the pinkness in ham? It's a chemical substance called a nitrite. It's a preservative, which is just one more thing in the food that maybe shouldn't be there. And there is pretty significant evidence to show that this particular chemical can change into a potentially carcinogenic chemical. And in other words, it could cause cancer. The next group is fish. Yes, well, fish is interesting, isn't it? Here's a tip. If you're buying fish, look on the packet and see where it was caught. If the fish was caught in the Northeast Pacific, do not buy it. You'd ask me, well, why? What's the big deal about the Northeast Pacific? Well, there was a nuclear accident up there 12 years ago, and they're still spewing nuclear waste into the sea 12 years later. It's still going on. It hasn't stopped. They don't know how to stop it. It keeps going all the time. All they can do is try and cool down the nuclear reactor with seawater. They can't stop it. So it's a very big deal. It's a big deal and people don't know about it. I would never buy fish that comes from that part of the Pacific. Test it again and see. You might be okay with it, but generally speaking, people are not. North Atlantic fish is better, for sure. Generally speaking, fish is a potentially useful food, but you need to test it because some of the fish, like prawns, they're scavengers. They tend to create a little more reaction when you test than, say, a whitefish. But it's an individual thing. Whether or not your body will take fish is up to you. You test it. But specifically, look at the labels and watch out for the Northeast Pacific. It is bad news. Okay, chicken. What's the story with chicken? Well, now that's one food that has an untold story. If you've ever seen the way that hens and chickens are produced, it's a very unhealthy environment. They put thousands and thousands of them into a shed, and then they basically feed them as fast as they can, and they grow very quickly. But because there's so many of them in the shed, disease is a problem. So they put antibiotics in the food to stop them from getting sick. So guess where the antibiotics end up? In your food. And antibiotics in your food is a real challenge for your digestive system. And as we'll see later, healing your gut is a massive key in getting well. You do not want to be introducing antibiotics into your food in any way, shape or form. If you can help it, it's very important to avoid it. So if you're looking at chicken, especially chicken that's coming from China and places like that, by all means test it with the energy kinesiology. You can do this in the shop before you buy it. You'll probably find that it doesn't work. Free range Irish chicken probably is fine. Organic is even better. But be aware, commercial chicken has a lot of potential challenges for improving your health. If you've ever bought a chicken, you know that when you put it in the oven, it sort of shrinks down, doesn't it? It goes down to nothing. That's because all the water that they've pumped into the meat to make it look good just evaporates. So it's not great. It's not a great food. Beware of it. Next, we're moving on to bread. Cereals in general. Now here's a very important thing to understand. Each of the 4 cereals, that's oats, rye, barley and wheat, they all contain gluten. But they each contain a different form of gluten. It's a completely different protein. So you may be sensitive to wheat gluten, but you're fine with oat gluten. The only people who are sensitive to most of the glutens are the celiacs, which is a much more severe condition. Again, it is an individual thing, and some celiacs can handle oats and some can't. There is a medical condition known as celiac disease, where you have an imbalance that makes you very sensitive to gluten containing foods, and this is different to having a food sensitivity to gluten, which is less severe but nonetheless equally destructive for your health. Having said that, there's a fair chance that you're sensitive to some degree to wheat gluten that is, even though you're not a celiac. You could have a gluten sensitivity to a greater or lesser degree. Let me explain. I come from an agricultural background and I have a degree in agricultural science where I specialized in crop production. So I know a little bit about plant breeding. The current agricultural model is let's get bigger yields from the crops. We need to make bigger yields so that we can make more profit. Okay, that makes sense. So they're breeding wheat for shorter stems, fatter heads, bigger yields. It changes the gluten and the constitution of the wheat. In doing that, they're not particularly focusing on gluten or your health. Their issue is yield. And so you're getting a product that is different to the more original wheats that we had. The more modern wheat contains a different composition with regard to gluten and other components, which also may be in a different form. And of course, it does contain all those chemicals that are sprayed on the crops as well, which is an issue, as we know. That's the challenge. To get the bigger yields, farmers spray more chemicals, and they use Roundup liberally. Be very wary of Roundup. Roundup is a disaster of a chemical from an environmental point of view and from a human health perspective. Roundup may be causing more harm to your health than almost any other chemical on the planet because Roundup affects the bacterial structure of the soil and it affects the bacterial structure of your gut. And the bacteria in your gut are critical for your health. So you'll see in a later module, it's really significant. So what about wheat? Take the bread that you're actually using, check it and see, is it okay for you? Test it with kinesiology. It probably is. If it isn't, then just avoid it. It's a simple thing. If it's not testing strong, it's no, don't eat it. for the moment at least. Now, as you'll see as we go along, as your body heals, you will start to be able to use more and more foods. If you're nutritionally deficient in something and you take the appropriate nutritional supplement to fix that, suddenly the food sensitivities that you had to one food may start to disappear because your body is now able to make the necessary enzymes to digest that food. So this is a very movable feast. We're moving towards greater state of health and well-being, and we're moving towards more and more situations where you can eat more and more foods as you get better, and you can still feel well and have plenty of energy, and you can have less and less chronic disease. So it's a journey. It's a journey, and you need to just have an understanding about what's going on. That's what this is all about. So wheat has gluten. In the manufacturing process, you take the beautiful whole grain wheat, it's got bran, it's got vitamins, it's got wheat germ, all the nutrients you need, and it's got carbohydrate. The bran is the outer hull, and they take that beautiful balanced food and they tear it apart and they produce an imbalanced food which we call white flour. Now the white flour is basically pure starch, so they add back artificial chemicals to try to balance it, including vitamins and other things. That's crazy. The crazy thing is that they were there in the very beginning anyway, but they took them out and they don't put them back in the right balance. This is commercial food. They also add additives that will help you bake the bread more easily, so white flour is very unbalanced. It's an unbalanced food and it can be quite toxic, and it's not easy to digest, as we'll see later, and it creates all sorts of metabolic problems in the body if you eat too much of it. Wholemeal bread, of course, is much different. Wholemeal bread is the whole grain as it was originally created, the beautiful grain which contains all the nutrients you need, and it's got everything in it in a much more balanced way. It also has the fiber which you need to keep your bowel working. Now here's another great secret to health. It's very important to keep your bowel working, and one of the big things you need to keep your bowel working is fiber. And fiber is something that you don't get in processed food, but you do get lots of fiber in plant-based food. If you eat lettuce, a good portion of that lettuce is indigestible fiber. So it doesn't have any nutritional value for you in terms of vitamins or minerals or even carbohydrates. But what it does have is the fiber to keep your bowel moving. You need lots of fiber to keep your bowel moving. If you have a healthy bowel, you're going to be going a long ways to having a healthy body. Because think about it, your bowel is your sewerage system. So if you have a bowel that's clogged up, all the toxins in the bowel are being recycled through the blood and your body is becoming more toxic. The bottom line is, if you're eating 3 meals a day, you should really have 3 bowel movements a day. And then you will be a lot more healthy. These are all simple tips, and as you start eating more healthily and as you start eating foods that your body appreciates, all this just starts to happen naturally. It's not like you have to force it. The reason it's not happening naturally is because you're out of balance. You're eating the wrong foods, and as a result, other things start happening that shouldn't be happening. They shouldn't be happening at all. So as we continue this journey, the first section of the journey, what I need you to understand is that this is a journey. On this journey, you will create your own healing program to bring you back to health. It's absolutely possible to get well and to stay well. I don't know where you're at, but if it's a journey, it is a journey of learning and understanding, and none of it is very difficult. A lot of it is common sense, but you need tools to do it, and you need a plan. And one of the key tools you're going to need in the journey, obviously, is energy kinesiology, so you can figure out what foods are good and what are not. And the technique you can learn is very simple, as I've said already. It's not difficult, and you can get a link on where to find the free energy kinesiology course in the description of this video. I'll see you in the next video as I continue to show you what you need to do with food to get yourself well and to stay well.